The w13 article review presentation topic is for the standardized test and within group segregation, the not so optimal ESL classroom for long-term English learner. The article reviewed by Jinhui Oh and Qian Chen. There are 7 parts in this presentation. In the first part is for the background of the study. And based on the previous phenomenon, checking the history of the segregation of English learner with the Civil Rights Act of the 1964, the law mandate the student of color could no longer be forced into school that offer low-quality education. The checking system particularly target low-income and racially minoritized students. These students are assigned to the low checks and committed to the isolation, which caused the resegregation in school. Child placement is not fully merit-based. Race plays a role in determining the mobility and child placement. The Equal Education Opportunity Act of the EOA of the 1974 was passed, resulting in the legal rights of the linguistically diverse learners being taught in the separate classroom. In 1974, the No Child Left Behind Act (NCLB) aimed at to provide all children to access the education so that they could meet the grade level expectation. However, there is some research gap for the previous research analyzed. First, although the NCLB No Child Left Behind Act aims to provide all children the access to education so that they could meet grade level expectation, it has been the punishment for the English learner. The second one is that although the previous study collect the factors of the perpetuating the long-term English learner status, it still do not know much about what becoming a non-long-term English learner implies. And based on the research gap, there are 2 research questions in this article. The first one is that how do long-term English learners react to being kept in English second language learning service based on their test score despite their perceived high English proficiency? The second one is that what are the consequences of the ability to grouping through the standardized testing on the social fabric in the English second language learning classroom? The first part is for the methodology. The participant for this research is the story for 3 long-term English learners at a rural high school in the southeastern United States and demonstrate the within-group segregation in the English second language learning classroom as a social consequence of the standardized testing. Period is the first generation immigrant. Whenever King and Pepe were born in the United States. As we can see, King and Pepe origin were both from the Mexican American. All of those 3 participants' home language is Spanish. In particular, Pepe have one more home language of the Yolochitl Mixtec. The connection of the data from this article used the narrative inquiry. With each respondent, it carried out 4 semi-structured personal interviews in the English. The period of the time is for about 4 to 6 hours per interview. Although all the interviews were conducted in person with Pepe, I conducted the first 3 interviews with Period and King online, and the 4th one was in person. The author tested field notes during the participant observation in 56 in the person class, which observed 20 classes for Period, 70 classes for King, and 19 classes for Pepe. The researchers also coded the data from both the interview and observation in 3 phases: open coding, XOR coding, and selective coding. Following a deductive process, I created 212 open curls for period, 168 for king, and 167 for papa. And there are 9 types of the classification in the XOR coding. There are the demographic and life story, schooling and ESL history, college and professional aspiration, student identity, English proficiencies and development, being an LTEL in the ESL classroom, insight into the BBA EL8, insight into access for the ELLS, and the last one is for the understanding the reclassification. After we recognize the data based on the emerging themes, the research conduct a relative damage analysis to interact with the individuals and describe their situation. The next part is for the result, and it will described by the Chen Chen.
Now let's move to the result part. There are three results. The first result is traction and engagement. Long-term English learners describe newcomer English learners as a classroom disruption and source of distraction. They associate them with talking too much, not paying attention, and engaging in disruptive behaviors. Long-term English learners feel that the presence of newcomer English learners frustrated them and impeded their ability to learn. And the second one is lack of awareness and experience. Long-term English learners believed that newcomer English learners lacked an understanding and awareness of the challenges of being an English learner and adapting to a new educational system in the United States. They assumed the newcomer English learners as inexperienced and suggested that they did not value education or comprehend its difficulty. And the third result is the social exclusion and linguistic isolation. Long-term English learners express a sense of isolation and exclusion from the newcomer English learners. We can see the picture. Long-term English learners sat in the back row. The newcomer English learners formed their own exclusive groups based on shared language and recently arrived to the country. In the article, long-term English learners reported limited communication and relationships with the newcomer English learners, choosing to distance themselves from them. Some long-term English learners opt for remote learning as a way to avoid the distracting behaviors of the newcomer English learners. However, it led to further isolation and reduced social interactions for long-term English learners in the English as second language classroom. Now let's move to the conclusion part. This study reviewed the awareness of students regarding their long-term English learner status and their identification as a distinct subgroup with the English as second language classroom. It was observed that the long-term English learners demonstrating negative attitudes towards newcomer English learners, expressing their dissatisfaction with being in the same classroom as them. In the English as second language classroom, the exclusive behavior of newcomer English learners and the counter-reaction of long-term English learners contributed to within-group segregation, which caused the long-term English learners who were marginalized to become linguistically isolated and socially excluded. Now, let's move to the research implication. First, for the educators should actively observe conversations between different English learner subgroups and maintain a critical perspective when making judgments solely based on test scores. And for the schools should recognize linguistic enclaves, be aware of the diverse characteristics of English learner subgroups, and seek ways to address their distinct needs. Acknowledging the diversity within long-term English learners label in terms of lived experiences, instructional needs, and family social economic status is crucial. And moving forward, it is essential for the entire school community to minimize separatism and build bridges among different English learner subgroups. Now let's move to the discussion part. First, let's look at the strengths of the research. The first one is the research has a unique perspective. The article utilizes narrative inquiry and narrative semantic analysis method, which provide a unique perspective on experiences of long-term English learners. And second, the article provides detailed information about the data collection process, including the duration of the study, the number and types of interviews conducted, and the participant observation periods. Now let's see the limitation and suggestion for the future research. There are two limitations of this research. The first limitation is a small sample size. The research conducted interviews and observations with a limited number of participants, period, king, and pepe. The findings may not be generalizable to a larger population, and the experiences of other individuals may not be adequately represented. And the second limitation is the reliance on self-report data. The primary data source were interviews, which relied on participants' self-reporting. This introduces the potential for bias and subjective in the data. Complementing self-report data with objective measures or multiple data sources would enhance the rigor of the research. To fill this gap, the suggestion for the future research are the following. First, increase sample diversity. Future research can aim to include a larger and more diverse sample of participants, considering factors such as age, gender, socio-economic background, and linguistic diversity. This would enhance the generalizability of the findings. Second is mixed methods. Combining qualitative and quantitative methods would provide a more comprehensive understanding of the research topic, allowing for a deeper exploration of participants' experiences and the potential impact of language assessment. That's all for our presentation. And now it's a question time. The question is, if you are the teacher in the English as second language classroom, how would you manage the situation of isolation between the newcomer English learners and the long-term English learners?